saying is that agency problem, whatever you're talking about, no, always managers or maybe the executives, they are always in tussle with the board. Many times they do not take risky decision, but board wants to really take the risky decision, but they do not do so because of the, let's say, their issues and challenges. If they take some risky challenges, definitely they are going to be in trouble perhaps. Therefore, many times they avoid it. But what I'm saying is, suppose the C-suite officials like a CEO, CFO or CHROs, these guys, they got to know that there is something wrong with the strategy, but still they accept the board decision. Many times it happens. I mean, though they question, but not that intent goes very directly to the board. What I'm saying, in similar such situations, no, what I'm saying is that is not a right strategy, which is not really, it's going to affect the survival of the firm. Therefore, keeping that context in mind, can you just highlight some of the, let's say, signals, whatever you have got these sort of scenarios where, I mean, the people are not questioning the, let's say, strategy of the board, rather they're accepting. What are the signals, few signals, if you can think through?
I think the first thing is, how aware is the board of the ground realities?
Yeah.
Because as a board, it's not like you are seeing on a day-to-day basis. You're probably an independent director, multiple companies. You have a skill set you bring in. But are you as aware of the ground level details as the management team? And I think a lot of effectiveness of the board comes in looking at the data through the management inputs, make it data-based, but listen to the management rather than assuming you know it all and you know it best. I think that whole data-based approach is where the rightness of the board's decision making should sit, rather than, okay, I'm the board, I've taken this view and
Perfect.
I'll just embellish on this, and I'll just pick up on Sir's contextual conversation, right? So, in a way, in a classical Indian setup, especially with me coming from a listed company background, etc., you will always have two sets of people: the executive directors, or the guys who are insiders of the business, and there are independent directors who bring in an outside perspective. As an insider, you have an agenda to fulfill, you have a better approach towards doing things, you probably understand competition better as to what is happening on the ground. As an independent director, you probably are blind spotted around certain things about how the management is, how the business is. So, ma'am's point about going through a specific rigor of a data-based, data-backed analytics, etc. So, today in this entire conversational context, what AI has brought in is it has just collapsed what is called as the information asymmetry, right? So, anyone can bring in, if I wanted to understand a particular company, I can just go to ChatGPT or any LLM and bring in the data. Your ability to create that trust with each other as a collective decision-making unit is more important than bringing in information to the point.
So I'll add one more point here. So you also have to see the life cycle of the company. Yeah. You know, first is when I am appointed as a CEO, I am supposed to bring the strategy. Board is not giving me a strategy, right? When I am giving a strategy, it's for me to go through the pressure test, which board will bring in the conversation by questioning the assumptions that I have made to build that strategy, right? That's fundamental point. Second thing that I want all of you to understand, there is a difference between the way a decision made in a startup board versus an established company board, which may be a holding company. Because in the startup board, what happens, we are by nature risk takers, because we don't have anything to lose, right? We want to, prove ourselves. We want to take risk, go and, bring the business in or whatever we want to create. But when it's an established company board, which to you report, remember they have created wealth. So in a startup mode, your focus is to take more risk and get more wealth. When you're established company mode, you are to protect your wealth, the one you have already created. So it's like losing 5,000 rupees and gaining 5,000 rupees. You are far more, sadder if you lose 5,000 rupees versus gaining 5,000 rupees. So decision, it's not binary. That's what I'm trying to say. It is little more situation based. That's what my experience have been.
So I think the one point is that, see, at the end of the day, the board is not the P&L owner, right? At the end of the day, the P&L is coming to the CEO and the respective body of the company, right? So board is there to possibly kind of work as a back-end mirror for you when you're driving at a speed of 180. You see what is coming from behind and possibly estimate or predict what is going to come ahead when you're moving at such speed, right? So I think the right board, the role is that one is that diversified thought process which is going to come at the table of the CXOs and the CEO of the company and possibly help the company to think more clearly while they are navigating in so many uncertainties and so on. So I think the logic what Kaustav you are bringing is going to be the frame of the execution, not the board, not the CEOs directly agreeing on the board what they are advising, because again the harder job is to the board than to prove with all data and facts. Why should I take up your some suggestion or guidance? Maybe in the next review I may present that, okay, there are so and so data behind my reasoning and logic, and hence this is the strategy to counter that. So I think the relationship, I see the inverse, where the board is going to work as a your accident avoidal mechanism rather than formulation.
But in many such, let's say, companies, no, if you talk about, let's say, companies like Tata and all that, no, initially the kind of idea we brought in, no, the strategic culture or kind of your organizational culture you have, then and there a lot of free discussion happens. Even the executives are free to really share their thoughts and all that. But in small companies, no, if you talk about the startup and all that, no, the promoters more or less they say come up with their strategies. They try to really, let's say, impose on the executives to really execute it. Therefore, then and there, what I'm saying is many times they fear at. It's what I'm saying. It's not going to be practically absolutely true for each and every organization. Absolutely true. But for some organization, this is definitely going to be.
So then the situation is, then the board is the executive officer. The CEO is not the executive officer.
Correct.
If the one who brings the strategy on the table, one who kind of decides, okay, this is what we have to do, then that's the executive officer. Maybe it's a group of executive officers taking the call, not.
Those cases, you typically bring in the kind of CEO who is actually the board's person to do what the board has.
Many times.
So, and if
This happens when you have the private equity or the VCs on your kind of things, and possibly there the equation changes and you have a.
there's a ton of promoters.
I won't say it will not change the equation, because I have also been working on that front. See, basically, the difference between a VC coming into a, I would say, private equity coming into a business versus strategic coming into a business and funding it, the VC always has a sunset clause. They have to exit 3, 4, 5 years. So the questions they will ask is all about what is it that I will get by the end of 5 years. So you have to sell that story to them. Whereas when it's a strategic, they're looking for 15 years, right? So there the conversation will be very different. So that's the reason I'm saying it is all situational. We cannot box them in.
So I have a perspective. Yes, no, please go ahead. Please. So I have a perspective here in terms of when you say that people don't really share. I think that's where the essence of conscious leadership comes in. I mean, a phrase which I love to talk about, which says that at the end of the day, and if I were to quote Martin Luther King Jr., there's a very beautiful phrase where he says that our days begin to end when we become silent about things that matter. At the end of the day, if you're talking about any of the C-suite leaders, I think it's very important to have, again, like I said in the earlier the courage of conviction to speak what you need to speak, right? And say what you need to say, because there's a rationale of why you're saying that. And I feel that, see, I've worked with different sizes of organizations, and I can say that if you come across with conviction, there will be people to listen to you. It's not just going to be, but many a times people shy away from thinking that, okay, if everyone is saying, I just chime in with a yes. And that's where the problem is.
I think you are playing a role of a devil's advocate. No, you are trying to put forth your point before them.
The situation which you are putting is that, let us say there is a family-owned board and they are really forcing the executives to accept that decision and move on. In that situation, it's a very tough situation, because as they said that it's the role of the CEO who should provide the strategy and not the board, and board needs to find the blind spot. But if the situation is arising other way around, then the executive has only two choices. Suppose he tries to voice out his concern that, hey, listen, I don't think this is going to happen, and still you are forced that, okay, I am a family board, I am the founder, and you have to execute it. 2-3 ways you can handle this. One is that is it possible for you to separate the roles? You know, a founder being out of the board, you induct more professionals in the board who can rationalize the founder's opinion and give you more leeway to handle the situation. And the third way is that you clearly tell them that, and which is what she is saying, that do you have a courage to speak up? So you tell them that, hey, listen, while I do not agree with what you are saying, but this is your company, you want to build a wealth around it, let's try this out, but I think let's put a timeline to it, 6 months or a year. If it doesn't work out, then we will have to change the approach, what you are suggesting, because it's your company and it is in your interest to maybe take a U-turn or change the left turn to a right turn. I think that's the way you have to pick up the signal and handle the situation inside.
I just want to add to one of his perspectives, right, and probably very practical from what Sir has brought into the context. Today, what has also happened as India has grown and we are getting some of the best practices from the global situations, people have started investing into dual boards. One is an advisory board, the other one is a classic corporate setup, right? The advisory board is probably someone who is bouncing off technical ideas with some of these guys. So their conversation around areas that they are experts in gets discussed in that area. But when it comes to a larger business-related conversations, business-related decisions, which could be anything to do with a culture, with a HR transitions, or capital allocation, as Sir said, those are stronger impacts on the balance sheet, on the P&L. Those are taken by a classical corporate board sector. And see, in this kind of a setup, you are having a little bit of flexibility to hone your muscle of your tech prowess with the kind of people that you would want to debate with.